Yamura Chapter 1. The End of Peaceful Days. Smoke rises from the flame-ravaged landscape into a blackened sky. The thunderous roar of thousands of men on horseback riding to war echoes back against the fortified city walls. The warriors of the surrounding areas are proficient riders and archers setting off to battle to protect their village. Raised before recorded history, Benares is encircled by 100-foot walls of stone, with the eastern side flanked by a deep ravine of natural origin. The men ride into the village through the toppled walls and stare down their foes, shadow-like creatures with fire for eyes. The creatures are called the Tskarii, and they have come to conquer. Leather shirts beneath iron hauberks protect the riders from light attacks, but as soon as the men see the opposition's forces, they realize their armor will be for naught. Captain Rivius of Averno's 5th Regiment and member of the Kuan tribe withdraws his sword from the belly of a farmer and pushes him to the ground with his foot. The farmer's eyes remain open and lifeless as blood swells out around his form. "It appears this village still has some warriors after all," Rivius grins. "Kill them all." The front lines of men are knocked down from their horses as the skies are filled with arrows. Screams fill the air, and the Tskarii are quick to rush in and swarm their wounded foes. Swords come down hard in killing blows, and the reeling warriors, still mounted, are forced to break their ranks and ride into the side alleys in an attempt to flank their opponent's archers. Rivius instructs several groups to pursue, and they rush off on foot after their prey. At the end of the alleys, the horsemen turn and spur their steeds onwards in a full gallop. The Tskarii are cut down easily, and only a handful are able to pull riders down and kill them. Angered at being outmaneuvered, Rivius calls for his magicians to step forward. "While they are within those narrow spaces, they are easy prey. Burn them to ash!" Rivius screams. "Diosa aginestra!" The soldiers weave intricate hand signs while visualizing the symbols to call forth the magical energies. Flames erupt from their hands in torrents and fill the streets and alleys. It only takes the Tskarii an hour to finish off the last of the village's defenses, and soon no man is left alive. Women and children are corralled by soldiers laughing with delight. Many are lashed with claws and blades, but left alive under the captain's orders. "Weaklings, the lot of them!" Rivius laughs, licking the blood off his blade with a long forked tongue. "If this was any indicator of the human strength, we shall not need the might of the invading force. Our scouting expedition shall suffice to conquer their world." There is a larger concentration of humans several miles to the east, a teal-skinned Tskarii soldier says, dragging a crying woman behind him by a leg. "Rope those still remaining alive together as slaves. We shall gain great riches selling these humans back in the capital." "The east is mostly desert, sir. I haven't sensed much life in between." "Gather as much water as possible, then cure and dry the flesh of their dead for travel. We may need the extra supplies, should the desert prove difficult." Enkidu Harlura leads his horse to the ridge overlooking the walled city of Ktal-Takuk. His horse is a powerful beast, and it snorts before stomping its feet upon stopping. Wrapped cloth covers most of the man's face, protecting him from the sun and the strong winds of the arid region. Over the years, the nearby rivers have been diverted to the larger and more populated city of Levant. This has left the nearby villages having to rely on wells and other sporadic sources of water to sustain them. The 100-foot-high walls serve to protect the citizens of Ktal-Takuk from roving bands of thirsty marauders. "Everything will be okay now, Galen," Enkidu says, patting the small bundle strapped to the back of his horse. An infant's wail responds, and he knows that he must reach the city soon and find food for the child. Carefully, he leads his horse down the steep embankment. "Be careful now, Kiares." With few stumbles, the mighty steed brings them down the hill into the large gates marking the front entrance of Ktal-Takuk. "Open the gates. It is Enkidu. I have returned from Dwarka." Chains are pulled over numerous levers, and the stone gates slowly begin to rise with a loud rumbling. Dressed in leather armor with long swords at their hips, Men of the city guard lower the gates back into place as Enkidu enters. "Welcome back, friend," Amastas Reeson, captain of the city guard, says in greeting. The captain towers over his fellow guards at nearly 7 feet. Long strands of dark hair wrapped in decorative clay beads drape well past his shoulders to the middle of his back. He approaches Enkidu and clasps his hand tightly with a smile. "Is Dwarka as filthy as I remember it?" "That city is a vile and immoral pit," Enkidu says as he dismounts. "Loose women and men, animal worship, and all forms of debauchery imaginable," he finishes with disgust. Amastas begins to laugh. "That's so. I may have to volunteer my sword for the next trade caravan. I have already known all the loose women our city has to offer." "Cleanse yourself and pray," Enkidu says with a sigh. "Nothing that city offers is to be emulated." Amastas frowns, realizing his humor is lost on the ever-serious man. "I have not seen your kinsman Yasun for days, but I know he will be grateful you have brought his son forth from that place," Amastas says, switching the topic. "What of Taraxime? I do not believe she willingly gave her son to you." The captain's face becomes stern. "You did not shed blood over this, did you?" Enkidu is given a cup of water by one of the city guard and hands Galen to a midwife to cleanse and feed the child. "Her kin worshipped at the altar of the serpent," he says, emptying the glass with abandon and asking for another. "I did not take any lives, if that is what you ask." Seeing his friend's relief, Enkidu continues. "There are more cults appearing in the west each moon. Something must be done to stop their spread, lest the serpent's fangs reach our own gates. I am sorry, but my sword is pledged to protecting the village. It is the duty of the warrior priests, such as yourself, to engage in religious battles." Enkidu sighs and hands the empty cup back to the guardsman. "I shall pray for guidance on the matter." "If it were I that had a direct line to the heavens, I would pray for more swords and less foes, not guidance," Amastas says, beginning to ready his own horse for a security ride outside the walls. "Master Hoyles is not at my beck and call. He is a watcher of events, and only guides me when he feels it is necessary for me to be guided." Enkidu helps sling a blanket over the back of Amastas' horse. "Regardless, he does not watch over us from Anshar. He resides on a world called Halavan, much closer to our own. The Hashmalim do not have the authority or the ability to order the swords of heaven into battle." Yes, I know, they just watch and guide," Amastas says, as he ties his blanket together beneath the horse. "Even so, you are fortunate to commune with a Yazata at all. Most of us go their entire lives without ever seeing or speaking to one." "Of that I am aware, and thankful." Enkidu clasps his friend's shoulder. "Be careful out there, my friend." Enkidu is given Galen by the midwife and leads his horse by hand down the street towards the temple stables. He passes a dimly lit building from which raucous noise emanates. Loud voices and laughter pour out onto the streets from the doorway, and an older man with long dirt-matted hair and a thin frame stumbles outside and collapses to his face with a pitiful moan. "Fausto, what are you doing?" Enkidu asks with disappointment as he helps the drunken man to his unsteady feet. "It is not yet even midday. Is this where you spend all of your time now?" After taking a moment to focus his vision and thoughts, Fausto smiles upon recognition of the blurred face. The man's smile is jagged and many prominent teeth are missing, while the rest are yellowed and chipped. "Did you expect me to return to the temple and worship?" Fausto laughs. "I told you when I left I was finished. I dedicated my life to being a priest, and have nothing to show for it in the twilight of my life except for regret. Our lives are not our own. We live to serve others." Fausto presses a bony finger toward Enkidu's face. "A man who has lain with his kinsman's bride is not one to lecture me about morals and responsibilities." Enkidu stumbles and is taken aback by the former priest's jab. How is it that every soul in this city knew of their binding except I? That is an important query. It makes one question the sincerity of your claim. I have sworn time and again that I had no knowledge of their coupling. Tskarii approached me as a woman with no ties to another. As we have now seen, that is the way of the Dwarka. They hold no value on faithfulness. Even Master Hoyles warned me that she would be nothing but trouble and bring disaster, Enkidu thinks with sadness. I blocked out all reason and gave in to my desires alone. He could have told me the truth, but he knew it was not his place to interfere. I am no better than anyone I look down upon. My crimes are no less than any man's. I do not claim perfection. No man has ever lived that has attained such. We are flawed creatures that fall short of the true path. Fausto moves back and laughs. I am no longer of the faith, so my drunkenness is no sin to me. The abandonment of your faith is a grave sin. Galen begins to cry loudly as Enkidu angrily raises his voice to his former superior. Do you truly believe that you can mend the relationship between you and your kinsman by bringing his son back to him? Perhaps not, but Galen's life would be doomed to evil were he to be raised in Dwarka within a household of the serpent. Fausto pauses, momentarily reflecting on this news. The Eridae clan worships the serpent? Galen would have been instructed in their ways and grown into a man of their liking. My actions go far beyond the problems between his father and I. I am preserving my kin, and our future. Enkidu glances back into the tavern for a moment before responding. The ale beckons my return. I bid you good day, my former brethren. He returns inside without another word, leaving Enkidu in the street. You will never find happiness in there, Enkidu says in sadness. Ornaxes Eridae rides at the front of the small caravan of his two sons Itam and Ditava, his eldest daughter Tskarii, and 24 of their slaves, both male and female. When we find that pig dog, do not allow him to escape, Ornaxes says with a strange voice as his nose was just recently broken. If he hides in his temple, burn the damned thing to the ground with him inside. And if he is in still possession of your son, Itam asks Tskarii. The child would be better off as a sacrifice to God than to be raised by those priests, Tskarii responds with coldness. Ornaxes pauses and holds a hand up to halt the caravan as he sees smoke in the distance. He instructs 3 of his servants to scout ahead and discover the origin of the smoke. 20 minutes later, the men return and describe a ruined farming village with bodies lying in the streets. There does not appear to be any survivors, my lord, one of the servants reports, still trembling. Many were skinned alive and had large amounts of flesh missing, as if they'd been devoured. Was it ghouls? Ornaxes asks, meanwhile waving his hands to instruct the others to dismount and draw their swords. Let us go wide around the village and avoid whatever causes this destruction. Protect our rear and guard against marauders. After several more hours of riding, the procession nears the more arid regions comprising the desert of Ayodhya, and last landmark before reaching the city of Katal from the west. Do not show any aggression towards the city guards manning the gates. I shall gain us admittance without violence, Tskarii says. Should we not also kill the boy's father? Itam asks. Iyason is devout to me. Even after my betrayal, he shall do whatever I ask, Tskarii smiles. He will accompany us back to Dwarka, and if he becomes a problem, we shall sacrifice him to God. We need only to kill Enkidu. No one else concerns us. Should a battle break out, our numbers will not be sufficient enough to survive, Ornaxes says. Ornaxes suddenly tumbles from his steed, an arrow driven through his throat. Father! Itam screams, leaping from his horse and diving to Ornaxes' side. He takes an arrow to his right thigh as he tries to shield his father, and the man chokes on his own blood. Form a circle with the horses and protect us! He screams at his slaves. Captain Rivius leads his forces in closer, continuing to rain down arrows. Strip their horses down and salt the meat for travel. Rivius smiles as he sees the dark-skinned slave girls huddling for protection inside the caravan, beside Taraxime and her brothers. Try to take the females alive. We can never have too many slaves to sell. He glances back at the procession of nearly 260 bound slaves already in their possession. A loud horn blows, and the city guardsmen scramble to their lookout posts along the walls. Archers ready themselves and stare out across the wasteland, looking for the threat. Amastus appears in a full gallop on his horse, blowing the horn as he rides towards the gates. The gates are open as quickly as possible, and Amastus nearly topples from his steed in exhaustion. We discovered the bodies of several women bound with rope lying dead in the desert. I assumed that slavers had raided Benares, and that these were the poor souls who were too weak to keep up with their procession. But we rode out to Benares and discovered the village in ruins, and no one left alive. Amastus says, panting with exhaustion as one of the men brings him a cup of water. I've never seen raiders skin and strip bodies of their meat, and ghouls do not use knives to do their atrocities. Enkidu approaches after having heard the sound of the horn. What were they then? We backtracked and circled around the marauders, and were able to pick off a few of their outliers before being spotted. They were unlike any creature I've ever seen. They stand on 2 feet like us and wear armor, but instead of horses they ride giant lizards, and their skin ranges in color from a deep red to all shades of blue. Many had horns, and all of their eyes glowed unnaturally. They were surely demons. Enkidu leaves to gather his sword and armor. Enkidu, Amastus says, take a moment to pray for our village, and ask your Yazata for help. Nodding, Enkidu runs off. Amastus calls his men together to prepare their horses and make sure their fortifications are stable. These are no marauders. These creatures are well armored and organized into a military unit. I fear they mean to invade our city. We must ride out to meet them and not allow them the opportunity to siege. They were able to breach the walls of Benares, so I do not believe we will be able to hide behind our own walls for long. Captain Rivius grins as his forces approach the ridge overlooking Katal Tukuk. The first soldier to breach their walls shall lay claim to any slave he wishes. The Tskarii shout with excitement and pump their fists into the air. The grand promises made to them of riches and plunder and humans to slaughter is finally being made good. The majority of members of Rivius's regiment are not professional soldiers, but rather conscripts and criminals. Rivius tries to pay this no mind, or think of it as an insult to King Marduk. To him, it is a great honor to lead the initial forces. Without his scouting party, the 4 great generals could very well find themselves in a trap. He finds it comforting that even the likes of Yamura and Hui will be indebted to him upon his success. To motivate his troops and have them put aside their fears and reservations, he does all he can to drive up their adrenaline and fuel their bloodlust. One by one, these weak human sentiments shall fall, and I shall be promoted for my spectacular victories this day. He thinks to himself, grinning as the first of his soldiers begin to batter at the city gates.